What if your life's desires were incredibly basic? Not hoping for success at work or to create a happy family. What if your biggest desire was just to feed yourself? Each morning, as the sun rises to scorch the already cracked ground in northern Kenya, Ekerot wakes up with one thing on her mind: find enough food to survive the day. Ekerot is living in the middle of the worst Kenyan drought of the last decade. Her people reared livestock, but now the sun-bleached skeletons of their cattle are the only memory of their livelihood. Ekerot and 4 of her friends had not eaten for a week, and word had spread about a church that was helping people with food. Ekerot and her friends set out on the half-day's journey to find this church. Joseph, a TTI trainer, welcomed them when they arrived. He had seen these same parched lips on countless others in his church. As part of his TTI training, Joseph learned to love people and meet their basic needs. Joseph brought the little food he had left to Ekerot and her 4 friends, and with bodies nourished, Joseph knew it was time to share the gospel. "Can I show you something?" he asked. Joseph went and fetched a small gadget with the entire Bible recorded on it in Turkana, the woman's heart language, another tool Joseph had been equipped to use. He pressed play, the woman stunned by what they were hearing. They had never heard Jesus speaking their language before. Maybe this Jesus understood them, their lives, their struggles. With each passing sentence, Joseph used his TTI training to clarify the gospel for them. When the conversation was over, all 5 women surrendered their lives to Christ before beginning the half-day walk home. 3 days later, Joseph received the news. Ekerot has passed away. She died from a hunger-related illness. The 3-year drought in Kenya had claimed another life, but the kingdom of darkness did not claim another soul. Ekerot had been welcomed into heaven, where she was now eating every meal at the king's table. For Ekerot, the gospel had come just in time through a TTI disciple maker.
That's a pretty powerful statement, isn't it? The gospel is only good news if it arrives in time. You sit in the gravity of that for a moment, it really starts to sink in. Well, that's why we are glad to be a part of the Timothy Initiative, which includes over 2.9 million disciples worldwide. As God is working not just in Wilkes-Barre, not just in Kenya, but in 42 other countries around the world. As disciples are being made, churches are being planted, leaders are being developed. We're in the middle right now of a series called Disciples Multiplied as a church. And over the last 2 weeks, what we've been talking about is that every believer is a disciple, and every disciple is called to be a disciple maker. Well, as we think about the disciple-making mission that Jesus has given to us, we think about the need for that mission to reach those who have never been reached. So, as we pursue this, what we want to do is, as a church, we want to invest in multiplying disciple makers, leaders, and churches here, near, and far. So, here's what that means. We have a goal as a church that by the end of the year, Our goal is to plant 100 churches with the Timothy Initiative by the end of 2024. How are we going to do that? Well, that's exactly what these boxes are for. So out in the lobby today, after our gathering, you will find these boxes on a table, and these boxes say Change for Churches. And the goal of this is to be able to raise money to plant churches in places like Kenya, to reach people like Ekarat, just like you heard in that video. Here's what's amazing. $400 plants a church globally. For every $400 given, a church can be planted with our global teammates with the Timothy Initiative. So here's what we would love to ask you to consider. Consider taking one of these boxes and committing between now and the end of the year to fill it with $400 that will plant a church. Maybe you could do that individually. Maybe as parents, you could get your kids invested in this. Maybe that's not something that you could do alone, but maybe your community group could team up and plant one or more churches together. Here's something that I would love to ask you to do. Maybe as you think about giving $400 to plant a church, you say, I don't know where I would get that money for. I would encourage you, take one of these boxes, take it home, and pray. God, will you please provide the money in unexpected ways and unexpected places so that I can give and be able to help see a church planted through the Timothy Initiative? And if that happens, if you pray that prayer and God answers that prayer, when you bring this box back, we want to hear those stories of ways that God has stretched your faith, strengthened your faith, and answered those prayers. See, what I love about this is when we talk about planting 100 churches, we're not just planting churches. We're investing in planting churches that will plant churches as they multiply disciple makers and leaders. So $400 makes that possible to countries all around the world that the Timothy Initiative is working in. And here's what's great. You've heard me say last week in the message that being a part of the Timothy Initiative has been the most transformative thing in my life and the most fruitful thing in my leadership that I've ever invested in. And what's great is we know exactly what we're investing in. See, we get to invest globally in the exact same thing that we're doing locally. So for those of you that have been disciple makers, those of you who are working toward church planting locally, those who are invested in our training center, you don't have to wonder or worry what your money is going toward. Your money in that $400 is making that exact same type of disciple-making training that leads to the planting of churches possible in countries all around our world. So here's what I would love to ask. I would love for you to ask you to consider taking one of these Change for Churches box with you. Here's what's really great, though. Your money is going to go way further than it typically would, because as a church, we are committing that we will match dollar for dollar the first $10,000 given toward this initiative. If you give $10,000, that results in $20,000 in church planting. Here's what's great. It doesn't end there. There is an outside donor who will match your $10,000, and cumulatively that outside donor will match our $20,000. Right? That's pretty cool, right? So we'll match dollar for dollar up to $10,000, which means $20,000, and then another matching donor will match that $20,000. So $40,000 given will result in 100 churches planted as we invest our change for churches as we continue to move forward in the disciple-making church planting mission that Jesus has given to us.